It was later than I had planned. The diner had been unusually busy that night, and ID stayed late to help clean up. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second feeling like it stretched longer than the last. My shift had ended hours ago, but the lingering scent of coffee and grease clung to the air, reminding me that I was already too tired to be walking home at this hour. I wasn't scared of the dark. Not really. I'd walked these streets countless times before, under the same stretch of dim streetlights and through the wet sidewalks that would often reflect the neon glow of signs. I knew the city well enough to find comfort in its familiarity. But tonight felt different. There was something off about the air, a heavy weight pressing down on the streets that made the quiet unnerving instead of peaceful. As I walked, I found myself taking the usual shortcut. It wasn't the safest route, but it was the quickest. I'd done it 100 times. It led me under an old, abandoned bridge, a place I'd always avoided as a kid. People in the neighborhood rarely spoke of it, and those who did seemed to tell stories about how it had once been a place for trouble, a spot where people got into fights or where kids dared each other to do stupid things. Now, it was just an eyesore, forgotten by most, standing there like a monument to neglect. I didn't want to go under it. Not really. But there was something about tonight that made me feel like I needed to take the shortcut. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from my shift, or the dull ache in my feet that urged me to keep going. So, I pushed on, passing through the cold, shadowed space beneath the bridge. The sound of the rain on the ground intensified here. The noise of it hitting the pavement echoed off the concrete walls, making everything feel distant and muffled, like I was in a vacuum. The bridge itself was old, its metal beams rusted and covered in thick layers of moss, the paint peeling off the walls. Old street lights above flickered intermittently, casting fleeting shadows on the cracked road below. The dim light barely reached the center, and where it didn't, the darkness swallowed everything. It was quiet. Too quiet. As I walked deeper into the shadow of the bridge, a cold gust of wind swept through, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My footsteps seemed to echo louder now, unnatural in the stillness. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, trying to shake off the shivers creeping up my spine. And that's when I saw her. At first, I thought she was just a figment of my imagination, a shadow that I had mistaken for a person. But no, she was real. A small, hunched figure sitting on the wet concrete just a few feet away from where the light barely touched. She was barely visible in the gloom, her body curled up in a way that didn't look quite natural. Her clothes, ragged and torn, hung loosely around her frail frame. The rain soaked her hair, which clung to her face in wet strands. At first, I thought she might have been a homeless child, maybe someone who had found shelter under the bridge to avoid the rain. But even in the dim light, there was something about her that didn't sit right with me. The way she was sitting so still, almost unnaturally so, was unsettling. I slowed my pace as I passed her, unsure whether to keep walking or stop and ask if she needed help. But as I got closer, I saw her eyes. They were wide. Unblinking. They locked onto mine, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt the air around me grow colder. Her eyes weren't like normal eyes. They weren't the kind of eyes that looked at you with curiosity or warmth. These eyes were dark. Hollow. Something in the back of my mind told me to move faster, but I couldn't. My legs felt like they were weighed down with invisible chains. I had to look away, but I couldn't. Then, she spoke. It was a voice so soft, so quiet, that I almost didn't hear it. but it felt like a sharp knife cutting through the thick silence of the night. "You see me?" Her voice was a whisper, more like a breath than a sound, but it pierced the space between us. I felt it slide down my spine like cold fingers brushing against my skin. I wasn't sure how to answer. I didn't know why, but the words caught in my throat. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I tried to force my feet to move, but my body wouldn't obey. I felt like I was stuck in a dream, caught between wanting to run and needing to stay. There was something in her gaze, a strange pull that kept me rooted in place. And then, the words finally spilled out. Yes. I see you." The moment I said it, the air around me seemed to thicken, like the entire bridge was holding its breath. Her lips twitched, ever so slightly, but she didn't move. She just continued to stare at me with those hollow eyes, her face expressionless but somehow pleading. I should have walked away right then. I should have turned around and run as fast as I could. But I didn't. I stood there, staring at her, mesmerized and paralyzed at the same time. She tilted her head, as if considering something. The tension between us hung thick in the air, like it could snap at any moment. And then, without warning, she spoke again. But this time, it wasn't just words. "Maggie." The name hit me like a physical blow. I didn't know why it felt so important, so urgent, but the moment she said it, something inside me twisted. A deep, unsettling feeling of recognition surged in my chest. My mind raced, but I couldn't place why the name felt so familiar. I had no connection to anyone named Maggie, no memory that matched the weight of the word. But it was there. That feeling. It was like a dark shadow moving in my chest, just out of reach, and it made my skin crawl. Before I could respond or even comprehend what was happening, she stood up. Slowly. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, her limbs bent in odd angles, as if her bones didn't want to cooperate. The sound of her shoes dragging on the wet concrete echoed loudly in the silence. I had to go. I had to leave. My instincts screamed at me to run, to get as far away from her as possible. But I couldn't. My feet felt like they were made of lead, and my heart pounded in my chest like it was trying to escape. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her as she slowly took a step forward. "Please, help me." The words were almost lost in the sound of the rain, but they were there, quiet, desperate. Her voice cracked as if she had been waiting a long time for someone to listen, and something inside me broke. It wasn't just pity. It wasn't just a desire to help. There was something primal in that request. Something deeper, darker. And that was when I finally snapped out of it. I turned and ran. The night had been quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that sits heavy in the air, making every small sound seem amplified. I barely managed to get any sleep after the incident at the bridge. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the girl with the hollow eyes and the soft, eerie voice. The name, Maggie, echoed in my mind, over and over again, refusing to let me forget it. I didn't want to think about it. I told myself it was just a weird encounter, a trick of the mind. It had to be, right? People didn't just appear out of nowhere, whispering names in the dark. They didn't stand in the shadows, waiting for someone to walk by so they could speak in that voice, the one that chilled you to the bone. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a trick. There was something real about it. Something wrong. Something I couldn't shake. The rain had started up again by the time I finished work. This time, it wasn't a light drizzle, but a torrential downpour that blurred the lights on the street. The kind of rain that soaked you to the bone within seconds. I was already wet before I even stepped out of the diner, but it didn't matter. I had to go home. But as soon as I stepped outside, the chill in the air hit me. It wasn't just the cold from the rain, it was a deeper, unsettling cold that seemed to creep into my bones. I tried to ignore it, to push through the discomfort, but the closer I got to the bridge, the more my feet seemed to slow. I should have turned back. I should have taken the longer route. But the bridge was so close, and I had to get home. The path was familiar, and I'd walked it 1,000 times before. Yet, tonight, it felt like the bridge was calling me, pulling me back under its shadow, like it was waiting for something. By the time I reached the entrance to the bridge, my heart was pounding. The sky was an endless sheet of gray, the rain coming down in sheets, blurring the edges of everything. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I looked up and saw the outline of the bridge stretching before me, dark and imposing. The street lights overhead flickered sporadically, casting a weak, unreliable light on the ground below. My breath came in uneven gasps, the cold air biting at my skin as I hesitated for a moment before stepping into the darkness. The moment I crossed under the first archway, the world seemed to change. It was like stepping into a different place, a place where time didn't move quite right. The air was thicker here, filled with the sound of the rain and the distant rumble of thunder. And then, as if it were a shadow moving out of the rain, she appeared again. I froze. My heart jumped into my throat as I saw her figure crouched at the same spot beneath the bridge. This time, I could see her more clearly. Her clothes were wet and clinging to her skin, and her hair, long and tangled, hung over her face like a veil. She sat motionless in the dark, her eyes just visible beneath the matted strands. For a second, I considered turning back. But my feet wouldn't obey me. It was like my body was moving of its own accord, drawn toward her, against. When I woke up again, I wasn't sure how much time had passed. My body ached, my clothes were soaked, and the rain was still pouring down in a relentless, unforgiving rhythm. I blinked, trying to shake off the disorientation, but my surroundings were unfamiliar. The bridge was gone. No, I hadn't been moved. I was still under the bridge, but everything had changed. The world felt wrong. The air was dense with an oppressive stillness, like the very atmosphere had been corrupted. I could still hear the echo of the rain, but the sound was muffled, distant, as though I were submerged underwater. The shadows seemed deeper, thicker, and there was something about the way the darkness pressed against me that felt suffocating. I could barely breathe. I stumbled to my feet, my vision blurry as I tried to gather my bearings. But that's when I noticed it, the smell. A rancid, rotting scent that clawed at my senses, making my stomach turn. I looked down, and my blood ran cold. There, spread out before me, was the ground beneath the bridge. It wasn't just wet. It was soaked with something dark, something that wasn't just rain. I couldn't make out the color, not at first. But then, it hit me. It was blood. The ground was covered in thick pools of it, the crimson liquid spilling from the cracks in the pavement and pooling around the base of the old stone walls that lined the bridge. The smell was overpowering, choking me with every breath I took. I couldn't even look away from the sight because deep down, I knew this was no accident. This was no random event. This was deliberate. My hands trembled as I reached down, touching the wet surface of the ground. The blood wasn't fresh. It had dried into a sticky, dark mass. And as my fingers brushed against it, I heard something. A whisper, low and quiet, creeping up from beneath the bridge. Maggie. The name sent a jolt through my body. It was her voice again, but this time, it wasn't just a whisper. It was an agonized cry, one that carried pain, one that carried a depth of sorrow I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt the cold creep back into my bones, a shiver of fear running through me. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run as far away from this place as I could. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. The whispering continued, growing louder, like 1,000 voices layered over each other. They were all speaking the same name. Maggie. 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 And then, the voice broke through. You should never have come here. I whipped around, my eyes scanning the darkness, but I didn't see her, not at first. Then, as if the shadows themselves had parted, I saw her. Maggie was standing in front of me, her form more solid than before. She wasn't just a shadow anymore. She was real. She was there, in the flesh, or at least, that's what it seemed. Her hair, drenched and matted, hung over her face, but I could see her eyes. Her hollow, empty eyes. But this time, something was different. Her expression was twisted, not with sorrow, but with something darker. Something more menacing. The girl I had seen before had disappeared, replaced by something far more terrifying. She opened her mouth, and the words that came out weren't words at all. They were screams, distorted and guttural, the kind of sound that rips at your soul, pulling everything apart. It was as though she was being torn apart from the inside. Maggie. Please. I cried out, but the words felt useless, empty. She didn't react. Her gaze locked onto mine, as if she could see everything I had hidden deep inside. It was a gaze that penetrated, that reached into the darkest corners of my mind, pulling at the threads of every fear I had ever known. And then, I understood. This wasn't just about Maggie. This wasn't just about a girl lost in time, doomed to walk the earth in search of something or someone. It was about what she had become. I had been so wrong. So blind. This place wasn't just a bridge. It wasn't a simple meeting point. It was the graveyard of souls, a place where the lost never found peace. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream and never stop running. But I couldn't. My legs refused to move. I was paralyzed, caught in her gaze, stuck in the web of despair that had bound me here. I don't understand, I whispered, barely able to choke out the words. She tilted her head, a cruel smile curling on her lips. The expression wasn't one of innocence, but one of something ancient, something trapped in a cycle of torment. You never will, she rasped. Not until you understand the truth. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Her voice was all around me now, her words echoing in my mind, repeating themselves like a mantra I couldn't escape. The bridge itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her voice. It was like the ground beneath me was alive, like the blood, the darkness, the very air itself was part of her. You're here because you were meant to be, she continued, her voice growing softer, but no less chilling. You walked through the gates of the forgotten. And now you belong here, with me. The ground beneath me trembled, and I stumbled back, trying to get away from her. My mind raced, trying to piece together what she meant. Belong here with her? No. This was all wrong. This was insane. She couldn't be real. But then, I saw it. A flash, a memory, or maybe something more, a vision. The bridge wasn't just a place. It was a sacrifice. It had been built on blood, on the broken promises of the living, and the whispers of the dead. People had come here, for years, to leave behind their regrets, their sins. And Maggie had been one of them. She had been abandoned, left to die under this bridge, her life snuffed out before it had truly begun. But her soul didn't move on. No. It stayed. It lingered. And now, it waited for those who passed through, those who sought answers, those who sought redemption. But Maggie wasn't looking for redemption. No, she was looking for something darker. She wanted company. She wanted me. I gasped, the truth crashing over me like a tidal wave. And that's when I felt it, the coldest, most suffocating presence suddenly, as if the entire world had shifted, a thick, heavy darkness that closed in around me, wrapping itself around my throat. I couldn't breathe. And I knew, deep down, I had no way out. The darkness was all-encompassing now. It wasn't just the lack of light, it was the weight of the air, the heaviness of the silence that pressed in on me. It was suffocating. My lungs burned, and the scream that clawed its way up my throat felt like it would choke me before I could let it out. I tried to move, tried to get away, but the ground seemed to shift beneath me, as if the bridge itself were alive, its stones pulsing with an ancient heartbeat. Every step I took felt as though the earth were sucking me in, dragging me deeper into this nightmare. I wanted to run, wanted to scream for help, but there was no one. No one to hear me. Maggie stood in front of me, her form flickering, twisting like smoke, her hollow eyes staring right into my soul. I couldn't look away. It was as if her gaze had rooted me to the spot, like a spell had been cast. You can't escape, you know, her voice whispered, so soft, so chilling. You're already part of this place. You belong here now. Her words sank deep into my chest, cutting through me with their finality. There was no escape. There never had been. The truth was clearer now. This bridge wasn't just a physical structure. It was a doorway, a threshold between the living and the dead, between the real world and something much darker. Those who crossed it were trapped, bound by the spirits of those who had come before. And Maggie had been the first. The one who had died here. But she wasn't just haunting this place. She was feeding off it. Feeding off the souls of anyone who came close enough. And now, she was feeding off mine. I felt it, the cold creeping inside me, sinking deep into my veins. It was like my body was turning to stone, my mind clouding over with fog. I could feel myself slipping into the void with every passing second. You don't get it, Maggie said, her voice trembling now, low and full of desperation. I waited for so long. And now you're here. You're mine. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight, to break free of this suffocating grip, but my body betrayed me. The blood beneath my feet, the blood of those who had died here before me, was rising, swirling around my legs like it had a life of its own. It was everywhere now, swirling in currents of crimson that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat. The dark water of the river below the bridge seemed to churn, too, as if the entire world was coming alive, and I was caught in the center of it all. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Help. I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over the cacophony of whispers in my head. Please. Someone. Help. And that's when I saw it. A flash. A movement. A figure. A man, no, not just a man. A shadow. He stepped from the darkness, as if the shadows themselves had given birth to him. I could barely make out his features, but I knew he wasn't alive. He wasn't like Maggie. He wasn't a lost spirit. He was something else. Something darker. Something more powerful. The figure loomed before me, tall and menacing, his eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. He didn't speak, didn't need to. He only stared down at me with an expression of cold indifference, his presence pressing against my chest like a vice. Maggie saw him too. Her expression twisted into something that wasn't quite fear, but more like recognition. She stepped back, her lips parting as if to speak, but she couldn't. The figure was too powerful. He reached out and placed his hand on my shoulder. The touch was like ice, searing through my body, and I gasped, falling to my knees. His grip tightened. And I felt something shift inside me, as if he were pulling at the very core of my soul. Who are you? I managed to whisper, my voice cracking. The shadow figure didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. His presence told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't here to take me. No. He was here to free me. Before I could react, the shadow man turned and started walking toward Maggie. She didn't move, just stared at him as if she were paralyzed, her hollow eyes wide with fear. No. Maggie shrieked, her voice breaking the silence. No, not him. But before she could finish, the figure raised his hand, and with a single, flicking motion, Maggie screamed a horrible, bone-chilling scream that shook the very foundation of the bridge. Her form twisted, her body convulsing, as if something inside her were tearing itself apart. The blood that had covered the ground began to bubble, rising up like a wave of liquid fire. The whispers, the voices, grew louder and louder until they became a deafening roar. And then, in an instant, Maggie was gone. Vanished. The bridge went silent. I gasped for air, suddenly able to breathe again. The pressure on my chest, the overwhelming darkness, had lifted. It was like I had been submerged underwater for so long, and now I had broken the surface. I looked around, dazed and confused, trying to process what had just happened. The figure turned to me once more. His expression was unreadable, his eyes glowing faintly as he stared down at me. "You're free," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "She is gone. But remember, this bridge never forgets." With that, he began to fade, his form melting back into the shadows, until he was nothing more than a fleeting presence in the night. The rain had stopped. The air was still. The bridge was just a bridge again. I was alone. I stumbled back, my legs shaky beneath me, and looked around one last time. The blood on the ground was gone. The whispers had ceased. Everything had returned to the quiet, haunting stillness that had once surrounded the bridge. But I knew now this place wasn't just a place. It was a symbol. A place where the past and the present collided. Where the forgotten souls of the lost were forever bound. I walked away, feeling the weight of it all, knowing that while I was free, the bridge would always remain. Always waiting. Always hungry for the next soul that wandered too close. And Maggie's memory. Her hollow, desperate face would haunt me forever. I didn't look back. And I never would.